Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I had a whole bunch of people send me this crazy story out of Canada regarding a landlord-tenant dispute. A landlord-tenant dispute. And by dispute, this one got crazy. So Doug, Patrick, and Nils, thank you very much for passing it along. From CTV. And Ben Miljur wrote this, and he's a multi-skilled journalist, according to his own CV. Landlord removes windows and doors after Maple Ridge, BC mom late with rent. So the woman is the tenant. She was late on her rent, so the landlord came while she was not home and removed the windows and doors from the building. We'll discuss how legal that is, but keep in mind this is Canada. Laws might be a little different in Canada than the U.S., but they're actually very similar. Maple Ridge, British Columbia, a landlord in Maple Ridge removed the doors and windows from a rental house after the woman who lives there with her two children fell behind on rent payments in July and August. It's been a difficult year for the tenant, who says she recently left an abusive relationship and hasn't been able to work during the pandemic. She told them, "We were short rent the month of July. My landlord had decided to come in when I wasn't home and remove the windows and doors on the exterior and the interior of the home. When she got home last week and found these things missing, she originally thought there'd been a break-in, but then quickly learned that her landlord was the one who did it. She said there was no notice. He didn't tell me it was coming. He waited till I was gone, so I feel violated. Because the house is now unsecured, the single parent was concerned about the safety about her 5 and 13-year-old children who were there with her, so she hired someone to board up the house. So she'd spend money to have the house boarded up, which she had to borrow, by the way. She said, I don't feel safe sleeping with my windows and doors open. So now she has to secure the door frame with a piece of plywood, which she drills into place when she goes through the door. And then when she has to go through the door again, she has to undrill it, go through the door, put the thing back up, and drill it back into place. While CTV News was at the house on Saturday interviewing the tenant, the landlord showed up. The landlord said, I think if she moves out, it's better and won't give me too much trouble. When asked if he was the one who removed the doors and windows, he said, yes, it was. So under the current state of emergency in British Columbia, a renter cannot be evicted for unpaid or late rent and must be allowed to work out a repayment schedule for any money owing since March. But there are no circumstances, and this is the journalist writing, where this landlord is allowed to remove the windows and doors in an attempt to get the tenant to pay. There's nothing in the law that allows that landlord to do so, said a person from the Vancouver Tenants Union. A landlord cannot destroy a door in order to make a tenant leave a premise. This is absolutely wrong. Now, the landlord acknowledges he does not know the ins and outs of the Residential Tenancy Act very well, and he told the reporter he may have made a mistake. This case, I think, is really a lesson to teach me how to find the right way to fix a problem, he said. Despite expressing his remorse, as of Saturday morning, he had not replaced the windows or doors. Now, they both said they've been in touch with the residential tenancy branch, hoping for a resolution of the dispute. The tenant said, I'm just waiting for our story to get heard and expedited with the branch, and we'll go from there. In the meantime, she said she's already looking for a new place to live, but hasn't had much luck because of the situation. Now, that story came first, and on its heels came the follow-up. After that report aired, the Residential Tenancy Branch's Compliance and Enforcement Unit contacted the landlord and the tenant to help broker a resolution. And on Monday, the tenant told CTV News that the landlord came back out and replaced the doors and windows that had been on the home. So the landlord made it back the way it was. The housing minister told CTV, I am aware of the situation in Maple Ridge and was pleased to see the swift response of our compliance and enforcement unit to address this issue with the tenant and the landlord. I encourage any landlord and tenant who has a dispute to reach out to the residential tenancy branch to understand their rights and obligations and to never take actions that could affect the health and safety of those that live in tenanted properties. The province created the Compliance and Enforcement Unit in 2019 to investigate allegations of repeated or serious infractions, and it has the power to issue fines, and that's what they do. The tenant said she's relieved to have the windows and doors back in the house and has been in touch with a renter's advocate to decide what her next steps will be in this dispute. Both the landlord and the tenant previously told CTV that they had complained to the RTB and both want a hearing to settle their issues amongst themselves. I can tell you a couple things about landlord-tenant law in general. It will vary wildly from state to state and country to country. But generally speaking, a landlord has something that he can rent out as an abode, okay? And a renter comes in and becomes the tenant. So it's landlord-tenant relationship, okay? In that relationship, money is what changes hands. And in exchange for the money, the landlord provides the habitable residence. So there are many cases that you study in law school where somebody's renting a home and it becomes uninhabitable. In fact, there's famous cases that go back to the old days in England where somebody's renting a farm or a house and the house gets destroyed through war. Marauding army from the mainland comes over and levels the house and leaves. And the tenant goes, gee, I'm not going to pay rent anymore. The house isn't here. And the landlord goes, yeah, it's not my fault. I didn't level the house. But the courts have consistently held that the contract, the relationship, is based on the idea that the landlord provides a habitable place and that the tenant pays for the habitable place. And if the place is not habitable, guess what? The landlord is in breach. And so that's the first thing you have to understand. The moment the man removes the doors and the windows from the house, he can't charge rent for it because it's not habitable anymore. That's what any lawyer or barrister would tell him. Once you do that, you're in breach. And of course, some people are going to say, but she's in breach because she stopped paying rent. Yes, she is. This gets us to number two. Number two in any legal dispute is self-help is fraught with peril. I've used that phrase before. Self-help is fraught with peril. It's almost never the wisest choice to take the law into your own hands. I believe it's even one of the closing statements on the People's Court. So if you've got a legal dispute with somebody, you should go to court and have the legal dispute handled the way legal disputes are handled. Because you'll discover that if you want to evict somebody from your property, there's a process to do it. In America, it often involves you sending them a notice to quit, which is a document that basically says you are in breach, I'm asking you to move out. And most areas have got some time frame within which they will allow a tenant to move out. And it usually gives them a few days to get their affairs in order and get their stuff together and to get out. And as many of you may know, and there's been TV shows and reality shows and movies and so on, where the sheriffs do this, where somebody has gotten a notice to quit, they didn't contest it, the time runs out, they're still there. The landlord doesn't go and throw them out. The landlord gets the sheriff and says, hey, sheriff, I've got this court order that says that these people got to move out. They didn't move out yet. The sheriff goes out there, knocks on the door. If there's no one home, he says, well, they've moved out. They go in, haul the stuff out to the curb, change the locks, start over again. But the judicial intervention through the court and then through the sheriff makes it legal. So if somebody comes back later and says, hey, I got evicted, it was unlawful. You go, how unlawful was it? There's a court order and a sheriff did it. Okay? But on the other hand, when the guy shows up and goes, yeah, my tenant stopped paying rent, so I removed the doors and the windows from the home. No one's going to look at that and go, oh, that makes sense. People are going to look at that and go, wait, you endangered that person and her kids. What happens if something happens to them? Guess what happens to them? Bad things. So self-help, fraught with peril. So the landlord who removes the windows and doors after the tenant stops paying rent, many people are going to say, but Steve, he had a point. Yes, he did. He is owed rent. Rent is money. If somebody owes you money, you can go to court and get a judgment against them and then hound them to pay you. That's the way you do this, okay? You get a judgment and then chase them for it. Collectible or not, I don't know. But what was the function of removing the doors and windows? He's trying to get the person to leave. Well, if you want them to leave, you can go to court and get a court order to do that. Oh, wait, you can't. So this guy here is trying to do an end around the actual situation that's going on. And again, I sympathize with him. He's a businessman who's trying to make a living. But right now, times are tough for a lot of people. And unfortunately, and I'm not sure what the situation is in Maple Ridge, BC, But I suspect that if he actually got this tenant out, he'd have a hard time finding someone to take her place anytime soon who is going to be paying the amount of money that he wants for that place. That's just the way things are. So it's difficult, it's unfortunate, and I know, it's, there's equities on both sides of the story, right? Both of them have arguments. But if nothing else, take from this video, this concept, self-help is fraught with peril, because there's a good chance that she can now come back and say, while I was staying there, the man did this outrageous thing, removing the doors and windows and so on. Luckily, it appears she didn't get injured by this or hurt by this or harmed by this. That's good, right? That's good. But you can imagine a situation where bad things could have happened. And then you know what happened? She'd wind up owning that house. She would. But didn't happen. We're speculating. So there you go. Doug, Patrick Nils, thanks for the story. CTV News, thanks for publishing both of those. And Ben Milger wrote it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Why do they put braille dots on the keypad of the drive-up ATM?